Good morning or afternoon, whenever you might be watching this module. I just wanted to take a moment and introduce myself in case you did not get to watch the first part of the training during Late Start the last time. My name is Rebecca Festa, and I am our district EL coach for K-12. Today, our module brings us to cultural competence, building a culturally responsive and inclusive learning environment in West Valley. And I feel that we already have foundations built for this, and we are just going to keep building and improving every day as we go. At least that's my goal. Part of this training today is from information from Professional Educator Paraeducator Standards Board that they put out, as well as some other content that I have added to enhance their presentation. And the areas that we are going to cover today are understanding culture and privilege, our cultural community, culture and the classroom. We'll have activities. I should have put IES instead of Y here because there will be some activities embedded throughout today. Some of them, my office is in a building, and so bells go off. I apologize for that. As I was saying, some of the activities are going to be things that you are just going to keep for your personal self. And then I may have an assignment for you to do and turn in as well, like we did last time. Okay. Under understanding culture, these are hopefully some things that you are going to take away from this training. You will understand what it means to be culturally and linguistically inclusive. You will, under culture and privilege, you will explore the issues of power, privilege, and social justice. Under cultural community, you will get a better understanding of the languages and cultures represented in our school district. And culture in the classroom, you will be able to identify the characteristics of a culturally and linguistically inclusive classroom. Some of these modules may happen before the other. The way the paraeducator information that they put out, some things kind of overlap each other, but these are the core things that you will hopefully take away. And this training is set up to be a 4-hour training. So I will tell you that you will have part of it today, our Wednesday, our late start on October 20th, and then you will have the next part on your next late start. Okay. I know we're not together for this training. We're not sitting all in the auditorium or something, but I just want to go over some norms for participation. I really hope that you can be present and attentive to yourself. And if you're working with a group of other people, to the other people around you and participate in the activities. I hope that you can engage in active listening in a quiet spot and take some notes if you need to. Please, for today, I ask that you either you open a Google Doc or you have paper and pencil or both. One of the activities is you're going to be drawing something or making a graphic organizer. So if you can do that on your Google Doc, that's fine, but you may want to have both. Please email me if you have any questions so that you can enhance your understanding. And then after this training, please allow yourself some time and space to process. Give yourself permission to speak from your experience once this is over. If you are like me and you're someone that has to process things and then you like to talk about it, just be sure you're speaking from your experiences. And when you have conversations with other people, it's really important to be aware that you have a voice, and so you want to step up and speak your voice, and then be able to respectfully step back and listen to somebody else's voice and their point of view. And make sure that our conversations are student centered after the training, because this is why we're here. We're here for our students, and we've chosen this career because we want to help shape and mold the lives of young learners. And I'm just asking you to have Google Doc or paper ready for notes. Like I already said that. It is a Monday. Um, so the Paraeducator Board puts out some standards of practice. And so the standards that we're going to cover today are 5.1 with the knowledge competencies. So I'm hoping to give you the knowledge of respect for different ethnic cultural abilities and linguistic backgrounds of students, families, staff, and community being served here in West Valley. The knowledge of strategies to support and maintain a culturally inclusive learning environment, knowledge of student cultural histories and contexts, as well as family norms and values in different cultures, and then some skill competencies that you will be able to demonstrate are demonstrate the ability to assist in implementing educational material, which represents and supports various cultures and abilities of students being served as directed by certificated and licensed staff, and demonstrate the ability to foster a culturally inclusive environment as directed by certificated licensed staff or your supervisor. Okay, so why are we doing this training? Why should we learn about culture? Well, because we want to have an environment that is culturally responsive in education. And culturally responsive education is just good teaching, says Ladson and Billings. It takes into account the whole child as well as the historical, cultural, economic, sociological, and political context in which instruction and learning occur. It is good instruction for a particular child in a specific place, time, and context. It results in personalized learning that builds on diversity, equity, and social justice. There are essential components to being culturally responsive or a culturally responsive educator. The first is knowledge of yourself and others, learning communities, curriculum, instruction, and social justice. Okay. According to Geneva Gay, the author of Culturally Responsive Teaching, Theory and Research and Practice, she says, being a culturally responsive teacher includes using the cultural knowledge, prior experiences, frame of reference, and performance styles of ethnically diverse students to make learning encounters more relevant to and effective for students. Culturally responsive teachers, what do? They look at a student's culture as an asset to enhance academic and social achievement. Look closely at what students bring to the learning experience and not at any deficits. It can happen sometimes where a student comes to us and they may be from a background that we have no knowledge of or speak a language that we may not know and are struggling. And we just want to look at, okay, this student came from somewhere else, and where they came from, what was the experiences they had in education, what do they know, what is their background. So if we tap into those funds of knowledge of what the student is bringing to the table, we're not going to see the deficits. And understanding cultural characteristics and contributions make learning more interesting and stimulating for multilingual learners. Okay. Next. Culturally responsive education. Let me see if I can get my camera back on. There we go. Okay, you have to excuse me. It is a Monday that I'm recording this. And so if I stumble a little bit over my words, I apologize. Okay, so included in culturally responsive education, we are using this graphic to show in the core, in the center of everything, is we have to have knowledge of ourselves and then others first. That's the most important. And then we build learning communities and that relevant community or curriculum. Student-centered instruction comes, and then being socially just in the environment that you're in. So as I said, this important factor is the knowledge of oneself. Okay. Regardless of the external factors that impact a student's lives, the adults who interact with students are the most powerful influence in their school lives. Good teaching begins with you. To provide good teaching, an educator must have a background with knowledge of oneself and others, learning communities, relevant curriculum, student-centered instruction, and social justice. The inside part of the circle is the first part, as I mentioned. One can't learn about their community, curriculum, instruction, or social justice without first starting with the knowledge of oneself. So, when educators understand themselves deeply as cultural beings, they're more open to see and capitalize upon the unique cultural identities students possess. When we understand who students are, we are better able to show them and their families respect, establish an inclusive classroom environment, and design relevant curriculum and engaging instruction. Okay, so in understanding who we are going to talk a little bit about some invisible and visible identity traits. And this graphic is going to help us do that. We all have multiple dimensions to our lives that make up who we are, or an identity map. These parts of us can be visible above the surface or the waterline, like the appearance of our gender, age, race, language, physical abilities. But we also have dimensions to ourselves that are below the waterline or invisible, like our family status, our religion, other languages we might speak, our sexual orientation, our geographic location, our value systems, our life experiences, our education. Those things may be below the surface unless you're in somebody's core inner circle. People that see you just from the outside may not know all of these things that are below the surface. So I want you to take a moment and look at all those and start thinking of, what makes me me? What do people see just from the top of the waterline, above the waterline, and what do they see below? Or what is below, not what do they see below, excuse me. So for me, some visible things right off are I'm female, I'm 50 years old, and I'm white. But some hidden things to people that don't know me are I am an educator. I am the lover of the arts. I love acting in shows. I love going to watching theater. I love directing. I love watching my children in theater. So I just love all things arts. And I'm a mom and I'm a friend. And I should have added, I'm a daughter and I'm a sister. But if you didn't know me and just meeting me for the first time, you wouldn't see all of those things. So I want you to take a moment and think about What makes you you, right? What are some of your identities? And I want you to either draw yourself a graphic, an iceberg, or you can draw a graphic organizer, kind of like with the boxes. And so I'm going to pause. I want you to do that. You're not going to have to turn this part into me, but I want you to take a few moments and think about those things. All right. So hopefully you have drawn and written in some things that are visible to your identity and invisible. I want you to imagine each of us as an iceberg floating around. Other icebergs in our group only see what is above the surface, and it is very easy for them to make assumptions about the stuff below the surface. For example, someone might see our clothing and make assumptions about our wealth. The problems occur when these assumptions are wrong, and icebergs end up colliding under the water. We cannot avoid icebergs colliding, but we can try to become more aware of other icebergs so we can minimize the number of collisions that happen. This takes having conversations that elicit a respectful dialogue of questioning and listening to another's point of view, even if it differs from our views. As an educator, how might you get to know what's below a student's surface? And for me as an educator, I think of this and I think of students that come into the room and they may be gruff and appear disheveled. And as a human, it's so easy to look at the surface of what is going on with this student, right? And why he came in and knocked something off on the floor, or she, and why they're so grumpy, and why they look like they just, got up and wore yesterday's clothing. Well, if I only went by that, I might just think, oh, they just don't care. But when we dive in and have those respectful conversations and realize that, something must be going on, what might it be? And diving in below the surface, we start taking away all those assumptions, right? And building a more focal point of view where we know and understand where somebody's coming from. All right. Culture and personal bias. So we're going to dive deeper, and sometimes it gets a little uncomfortable when we dive deeper. And I just want you to take a moment and think about your life as an educator or as you've worked in the education field. Life experience leaves us with biases and prejudices, but it's our responsibility as educators to recognize them and adjust our actions based on our own self-awareness. Like, oh, why was I thinking that? And where can I make the shift? Teachers want students to learn and make many efforts to be particularly responsive to racially and ethnically diverse students. Many of the beliefs we hold and the lessons we're taught about racially and ethnically diverse students and how to best facilitate their learning have positive effects. You make the world of difference in our students' lives. However, sometimes, not intentionally, we may make a decision and it might be well intended and sensible, but it could end up having negative consequences for our students. So we want to be sure that we look at common beliefs and address why sometimes those beliefs may not be the most positive in our students' lives. So, to do that, we are going to look at the website learningforjustice.org. It used to be called teachingtolerance.org, and they put out some awesome material when for schools and educators regarding bias for students and educators. So we're going to go to this survey, and I'm going to ask that you do this. You're going to probably have to open it and print it off if you have a printer available. If not, you can just write the answers on your paper or on a Google Doc. That is fine. This activity is actually going to take you quite some time, and that's okay. I want you to be very thoughtful, okay? And some of the things might make you stop and ponder and maybe feel like, why are they asking me this? I just want you to please just take a moment and look at the question and try to answer it as best you can. It's okay to feel a little uncomfortable because through discomfort comes growth. I always feel that sometimes things are going to feel a little uncomfortable, and then I know I'm going to grow. So I am going to pause for a moment. Okay, so you are going to work on this common beliefs survey. Again, it is a little long, but it shouldn't take you hours. I just want you to be thoughtful in answering these questions. And then we're going to talk about what teachingtolerance.org has to say about these common beliefs. Okay. So the first one, I don't think of my students in terms of their race or ethnicity. I am colorblind when it comes to my teaching. Your first thoughts, I want you to just write down, do you agree, neither disagree, or agree, or disagree strongly, and why you feel this way. Okay. And then you're going to go through the rest. The gap in achievement among students of different races is about poverty, not race. How do you feel about that statement? Do you agree with it, disagree, or are you just in the middle, and why? And it goes on from there. It's not fair to ask students who are struggling with English to take on challenging academic assignments. Do you agree or disagree, or you're just in the middle? So as you go through, please just answer how you feel and tell why. There's no right or wrong. However, teaching tolerance just goes over what believing a certain way, how it could affect our students in a negative way. So I will say, as an educator, I am here for students. I've always wanted to work with students. And before I was in education, I got my bachelor's in law and justice, and I thought I'm going to work with victims. Well, at the time, there just weren't positions available that would pay me what I felt I needed to help support my family. And so I had the opportunity to go back and get my master's in teaching. And I was like, perfect. I can still work with kids. And you know what? Sadly, there may be kids who are victims of some sort of abuse that I will be affecting their lives, hopefully in a positive way. And I was gung-ho to teach. I didn't care who I taught, where they were from. I just wanted to teach kids. And I said this first statement that I don't think of them, by where they come from, their skin color, anything. I just think of them as kids. And then someone brought to my attention, well, if you are saying that you are colorblind, um, that means that possibly you're not, I mean, you're saying you don't discriminate, that they're all kids. But the other part of that is, yes, you're treating them fair, right? And I'm loving all of them in my class and they're like my kids. But if I'm just saying that I'm not looking at who they are and just looking them as a kid, I'm not looking at their backgrounds, right? And their identities and where they're coming from. And I didn't want to just do that. Like, I wanted to know what they where they came from, the languages they spoke, the celebrations that they celebrated, because I had students in my classes in the Yakima School District from all places, like all over the place. And some students didn't celebrate the way I did at holidays. So I wanted to know, okay, so this is what I do on Thanksgiving. What do you do? And man, when you start diving into who your students are and they let you in, that relationship that you form with them is amazing. And I got some really good home cooking from families that my first year of teaching, because I was so excited to learn about what their traditions were and who they were and their families. And it just opened up such an amazing road to the relationship with the kids. And they knew that I really cared about who they are and what they brought to the table, and their families, because they went home and said, Mom, Dad, Grandma, Auntie, my teacher wants to know about this. They want to know how we celebrate. They want to know about what is important to our families and the dynamics. And so I want you to know that it's great. You know, of course, we don't want to discriminate against our students, but we also want to see who they are. And that's why I went into a little more detail on that first one. But the rest, I hope that you went through and just thought about. And then this is what teachingtolerance.org says, that those beliefs and the way they can affect students, or some misconceptions. And so they've tried to target those misconceptions for us. So if you will read through one thing, another one I want to just point out, and I know that you're going to read through these and compare what this says with what you wrote down. Please do. And again, as I said, it may take you quite a bit of time to dive through this, and that's okay. I really want this to be thought-provoking. So a common belief is it's not fair to ask students who are struggling with English to take on challenging academic tasks. And here's the background. It is certainly true that English language learners or multilingual learners who are struggling with English may and probably will have more trouble with tasks that require reading than students whose native language is English. However, when English language learners are asked to do less challenging work than other students, they fall behind and perhaps stay behind. In some cases, difficulty with English is erroneously perceived by educators as limited academic ability. Teachers need to guard against having low expectations. So we always want to give our new students, our EL students, chances and the ability to do what their classmates are doing, and just scaffold and scaffold up. We never want to scaffold down, because we want to give them those challenging content grade level assignments with students that are they're in their age group or in their classroom, but we just want to give supports with those things. And this says, the challenge is to engage all students in learning content are at relatively high levels. And again, just adding extra support, and know that your ELs are mastering not only their home language, because they're still, like I said, I believe previously, that they're still trying to become proficient in that home language and probably reading and writing. And then they're doing the same in English, and then they're adding on the academics. And so that's a lot going on and a lot of connections being made in their brain, and they are amazing. But we just want to caution that they are up to the task of challenge, and it may hurt a little bit, but if we give them the support they need and the scaffolds, hopefully it will, the frustration will be less. What else do I want to go over with you here? I'm not going to read all of these to you because I know you guys are more than capable, but I just want you to know these are just really thought-provoking questions. And another one on here is talking about race with my colleagues could open up a can of worms. Little good is likely to come from it. And I know right now in this country, there are just a lot of discussions about race and equality and being culturally responsive. And this addresses it in this way. Talking about what appear to be racial issues with respect to student interactions, student-teacher interactions, or interactions among members of the school staff is uncommon. We normally don't do that. Race is a hot button in our country, and it may feel that discussing potential misunderstandings or conflicts will make things worse. Moreover, many worry about being seen as insensitive or preoccupied with race. No doubt, some issues that could be race-related are not. But this cannot be known without bringing up the issue. While the country has made great progress in reducing racial prejudice and discrimination, negative stereotypes, concerns about fairness, and the absence of comfort in interracial relationships persist, especially when the stakes of common action or the resolution of interpersonal conflict are high. In schools where racial issues are openly dealt with, school leaders make clear that it is important to be candid and to trust one another while entrusting that action is taken when problems are surfaced. So, do we want you to talk about race and racial issues and politics with each other in the school settings? No. However, if there is something that comes up and you think someone has treated a student unfairly or inequality, then that's important that you are taking the steps to resolve what could be a potential issue. And that might be going to your teacher that you're working with, going to your building principal, but just if you see something, it's important to say something in the appropriate time and place. Okay. So thank you for taking the time to go through those and answer those questions, and then look at the beliefs and kind of compared to what you said. And I hope that you were thoughtful in your approach to these questions and what teaching tolerance or the just learning for Justice had to say. Okay, moving on. So, what's culture got to do with it? Culture, it turns out, is the way that every brain makes sense of the world. That is why everyone, regardless of race or ethnicity, has a culture. Think of culture as software for brain's hardware. The brain uses cultural information to turn everyday happenings into meaningful events. Zaretta Hammond. Oops. So, the definition of culture. Webster, in the Webster's Dictionary, defines culture as the customary beliefs, social forms, and material traits of racial, religious, or social groups, or the set of shared attitudes, values, goals, and practices that characterizes an institution or organization. And when we think about culture, or when I think about culture, I think of, I might belong to a variety of cultural groups. I may, at work, I've got my work culture. At home, my beliefs at home, my family culture, that dynamic I belong to. And then out in the community, my culture of the community of West Valley, of Yakima. So we might belong to a bunch of different cultures within who we are and who we identify with. Okay. Moving on. Let's go back to this. Okay. I want you again to reflect for a moment on these 4 pictures. Which image represents culture to you and why? So image 1, image 2, image 3, or image 4. Think about who you are. We've talked about your visible and invisible, below the surface identities, and which picture represents culture to you. And if you will write it down, be thoughtful as to why you chose the picture that you chose. All right, I hope you took a few moments to pick an image and why that represents culture to you. Okay. Now we have this graphic, culture in the classroom, because we can't talk about culture in education without thinking about culture in the classroom. These are some of the most visible ways in this graphic that make up someone's culture. Please notice that it is more than one's race or ethnicity. There's a wide range of differences between racial and ethnic groups. There are many other cultural components not on this poster that are invisible to the naked eye. Using the iceberg model of these, think about, okay, what might be above the surface and what might be below. So we've got language, medical cures, religion, child rearing methods, food, folk art, celebrations, jokes, manners, clothes and dressing, work schedules, all of these things that make up culture. Think about what might be above and what might go below the surface. Okay. How has culture impacted you? Choose 2 culture categories from the previous slide. And again, you're going to write this down. Think of examples from 2 of those categories that you have seen in school. What impact does it have on the classroom? Add them to your paper that you use to write about the image that represents culture to you. For example, I may think of my classroom in the past and think about celebrations that we've had and clothes. And when I'm thinking of my example, I remember um, having like holiday celebrations in the class, like Halloween, right? And I know that some students didn't necessarily celebrate. So we did talk about that. And we talked about if it was okay to still have those celebrations because I knew that some of my students may have never celebrated before. Perhaps their families weren't okay with part of the celebrations based on cultural beliefs, religion. So we had those conversations in class before we did those celebrations so that I was sensitive to those students. And then when I think of clothes, I think of students who came to class and maybe some of their cultural, attire, and how the student would have dialogue with me. I had a student that was from another culture, and they explained to me what it was that they were wearing on a particular day and what that meant to them. And um, I had some amazing students who just wanted to get to know why they wore what they wore and what the meaning behind it was. But think of other things that you may have had experiences with in the classrooms that you've been in, and were a student's culture, were they affirmed or did they get ignored? Did celebrations happen anyway without having regard for some students that may not participate at all and who felt uncomfortable with things? Were there certain foods that students couldn't have? Just anything from the last slide that represents culture that you can think of in the classroom, and was a student honored for who they are and their culture? Okay, I am super excited. I can't even speak today. Excited to share with you guys this video. This lady is so well spoken. Her name, I don't want to get it wrong. I even looked up on Google how to say it correctly because that is so important as educators that we honor our students and families' names and not try and change them because we can't say them. So we want to learn how to pronounce them correctly. And her name is Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Now, I might not have got the first name totally correct. I hope I did. Again, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, I believe is how you say it. And she is speaking about the danger of a single story. And there is a full video. It's about 18 minutes long. And I have added that to the slide here. But I've also, for today, I have a 4-minute part of the slide that I'm going to show you. But if you guys have time and you want to watch the full video, she's just so well spoken and has great things to say about the danger of a single story. And she says here, her quote, "The problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but they are incomplete. They make one story become the only story, but there might be multiple sides of a story." So I'm going to play that for you. Oop. Commercials. There always are commercials.
I come from a conventional middle class Nigerian family. My father was a professor, my mother was an administrator. And so we had, as was the norm, living domestic help who would often come from nearby rural villages. So the year I turned 8, we got a new houseboy. His name was Fide. The only thing my mother told us about him was that his family was very poor. My mother sent yams and rice and our old clothes to his family. And when I didn't finish my dinner, my mother would say, "Finish your food. Don't you know people like Fide's family have nothing?" So I felt enormous pity for Fide's family. Then one Saturday, we went to his village to visit. And his mother showed us a beautifully patterned basket made of dyed raffia that his brother had made. I was startled. It had not occurred to me that anybody in his family could actually make something. All I had heard about them was how poor they were, so that it had become impossible for me to see them as anything else but poor. Their poverty was my single story of them. If I had not grown up in Nigeria, and if all I knew about Africa were from popular images, I too would think that Africa was a place of beautiful landscapes, beautiful animals, and incomprehensible people fighting senseless wars, dying of poverty and AIDS, unable to speak for themselves, and waiting to be saved by a kind white foreigner. I would see Africans in the same way that I, as a child, had seen Fide's family. So that is how to create a single story. Show a people as one thing, as only one thing, over and over again, and that is what they become. The single story creates stereotypes. And the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. They make one story become the only story. It is impossible to talk about the single story without talking about power. How they are told, who tells them, when they are told, how many stories are told, are really dependent on power. Power is the ability not just to tell the story of another person, but to make it the definitive story of that person. I grew up under repressive military governments that devalued education so that sometimes my parents were not paid their salaries. And so as a child, I saw jam disappear from the breakfast table. Then margarine disappeared. Then bread became too expensive. Then milk became rationed. And most of all, a kind of normalized political fear invaded our lives. All of these stories make me who I am. But to insist on only these negative stories is to flatten my experience and to overlook the many other stories that formed me. The consequence of the single story is this: it robs people of dignity. It makes our recognition of our equal humanity difficult. It emphasizes how we are different rather than how we are similar. Stories matter. Many stories matter. Stories have been used to dispossess and to malign, but stories can also be used to empower and to humanize. Stories can break the dignity of a people, but stories can also repair that broken dignity. I would like to end with this thought that when we reject the single story, when we realize that there is never a single story about any place, we regain a kind of paradise. Thank you.
Hopefully, you enjoyed her talk as much as I did. She, the full excerpt is awesome. So hopefully, you can take some time and watch the full video at some point. So here's some questions to reflect on the video. What is the danger of a single story? And write a reflection about the tension between stereotypes and potentially useful generalizations. So I'm just going to have you think about that for a moment while I figure out my video.